Let's get more now on the situation in Dover, where the government says COVID testing has now begun. The British and French governments reached a deal to reopen the border to hauliers and some passengers if they test negative for COVID-19. But frustrations have boiled over after thousands of lorry drivers have been left waiting in queues for 2 days. Joining me now is Richard Burnett, the Chief Executive of the Road Haulage Association. Hello to you, Richard. I don't know whether you're able to give us an up-to-date picture of whether that testing has indeed got underway now. Very unclear for our correspondents who are on the ground to see whether any progress has yet been made.
That testing is underway now, and we're beginning to make some progress. Testing is being done on the M20 and in Manston itself. Vehicles are actually rolling onto Eurotunnel. There's a batch of 40 vehicles that are being sent into Eurotunnel at a time. The big issue that we face at the moment is the Port of Dover, which is completely gridlocked and it's blocked. There is an army team that's been blue lighted to the front of that queue to actually start testing the drivers at the front of the queue to be able to start releasing that. And that will provide the flow that should start to release those drivers from Manston. But we're looking at somewhere in the region of 8,000 trucks in the whole sort of Kent area at this point in time. And that gridlock is creating a massive problem.
Sorry, Richard, your line just slightly broke up when you talked about the number of trucks. How many, just to be clear, were you saying in the Kent area now?
Estimated to be around 8,000 in the Kent area, and obviously that number is growing as we see more vehicles, sort of try to get towards, Kent. The real message that we need to get out to hauliers and to European hauliers mainly, we're trying desperately to do this, is don't go to Kent. The message is do not go to Kent until we unblock this issue. Now, this is going to take us into probably Christmas Day, Boxing Day. This is not going to be an easy fix, and we're going to see drivers stuck here for a number of days until this is resolved, I would suggest.
I mean, that is a really grim prospect for Christmas, isn't it, for those who are there, who have been stuck there for several days already. We've seen tensions rising, particularly at the port. As you said, it is blocked. Testers are arriving there, but you can understand why they are frustrated there, can't you? Because they were being told to turn around, having waited there, been at the front of the queue and been told they had to go to the back of the queue at Manston, and nobody wants to do that.
Yeah, I understand the tension and the frustration. I think it's an incredibly tense situation for everyone. But I think we've got to try and resolve and unblock this primary issue to get the flow going. And once that happens, then the testing, we can get on top of the testing. We can actually get on top of moving vehicles out of Manston and get on top of this problem. But the issue here is it's going to take a significant number of days to unblock this, and I think people need to bear that in mind.
Looking at the pictures as well, this all seems really counterproductive as well, doesn't it? This is about trying to stop the spread of the virus, and yet instead of having drivers in their cabs, relatively isolated from others, we are having large groups of people gathering, not all of them wearing masks, and potentially spreading that virus.
Look, it is completely counterproductive, but I think there's growing frustration, I guess with the French position on this. We've said for a long time that drivers, because they're isolated within their cabs, because they socially distance when they collect goods and deliver them, have a very low risk rate. And by bringing them into this scenario, it absolutely, heightens that risk. But like I said, the French have got a lot to answer for here. Taking into account those very low, sickness rates, I think it's fair to say that these drivers were very low risk in the first place. Why did they bring this into play? It feels like it's an approach that the French have been taking around the Brexit negotiations at the 11th hour to try and demonstrate what the impact of this. This may well be to transition, and it's deeply frustrating, I think, for all of us.
Given that we have been gearing up to the end of the transition period, though, anyway, should we not have been prepared for this? We've got drivers with no facilities whatsoever at the port, very limited availability of toilets, of food, of drink. And should the government not have predicted this? When the Prime Minister stood up on Saturday and gave this news conference and said quite how transmissible this new variant of the virus wasn't it inevitable that other countries were going to listen and say, hang on, we don't want it?
Sarah, look, you're absolutely right. And, this is about, stopping the spread of the virus as well. We understand that. But, I think government do need to be held to account here, in terms of the transition planning. What they've been telling us for months, if not years, is that we're on top of this planning. This is a demonstration that clearly the plans that government have been working on and the local authority in Kent are simply not sufficient to deal with this. And let's face it, if we have the fishermen, against the backdrop of the no deal in France, want to blockade Coquelles and Calais, it would have been exactly the same scenario, and government should have been planning for that. This is wholly unacceptable, and there needs to be some serious lessons learned, from this, I would suggest.
In terms of that testing, which is now underway, what plans are in place for those drivers who may test positive? Are you happy with what has been agreed?
So at this stage, that's still, there are elements of that are still work in progress. What we do know is that if a driver tests positive on the M20 or within Manston, that driver will be quarantined within Manston within their vehicle. They will have a PCR test while they're there. Once the result comes back and confirms if they are positive, then that driver will then be taken to a local hotel, which is being set up as almost a hospital to quarantine and contain those drivers. The detail that we're still trying to work through is, what do we do with the vehicles? Those are going to be left in Manston. They could be loaded. What do we do with the load? How do we clean the cabs down to make sure that they can be released? That's a level of detail that we still haven't got. And, we certainly need to understand that over the course of today, just in terms of how we deal with those elements.
OK, Richard Burnett, that's all we've got time for. I'm sure we will be speaking to you again over the coming days. Thank you very much indeed. But that latest information there from Richard Burnett of the Road Haulage Association is that testing is underway on the M20.